Hello, everybody.
Hello,
So we're
teacher.
going to, hello.
Hello, teacher.
So we're going to, hello, everybody. So we're going to get started today on our topic. And this is our third lesson. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got some slides. Hopefully this will make it nice and easy. So today's lesson is going to be on understanding the interlocutor, the motion, the proposition, and the opposition. So these are some of our most important terms that we need to understand. And once you understand these properly, it's going to make your debating experience a lot easier and a lot more fun. So let's learn about the important parts of a debate. So it is important to understand the key terms used in a debate so you can address other people by the correct title and follow the conversation as it happens. So as we mentioned before, the terms we're going to be focusing on today are the interlocutor, the motion, the proposition, and the opposition. So first of all, we have the interlocutor. The interlocutor is the moderator or the facilitator of the debate. They ensure fairness, manage the debate, and maintain order. So the interlocutor, one of their big jobs is to make sure that the judges reach their decision of who wins, but he makes sure that the judges follow the rules. So they keep the debate nice and fair. They introduce the motion to the debate. It's their responsibility to make sure everybody sticks to the time limits of their turn to speak. And they also run the question and answer sessions, because normally in a debate, we have a section of the debate where the judges and the audience can join in and ask questions of the two teams. So the interlocutor is a very, very important person. Next up, we have the motion. Now, the motion is the topic or the proposition that is being debated. The motion is important because it sets the framework for the debate and it guides arguments. Now, what that means is that the framework, I should say, the framework is basically the structure of the debate. So it lets people know what we're talking about and how we're going to talk about it. So to understand the motion a little bit better, let's look at some examples. So I have a list here. I'll have a look through your Zalo group to make sure that you guys have received all of these documents. But if we have a look here, if the topic of the debate is, should every child learn to swim? So that is what the interlocutor would introduce, the topic of the debate. And when the affirmative team or the proposition, when it's their turn to speak, they would make the motion that this house believes that every child should learn how to swim. So the motion is really just a way to phrase the argument to let everybody know which side the proposition is arguing. So if we have a look at topic number 2, should children be allowed to have smartphones? The proposition team, which we'll discuss later, would make the motion that this house believes that children should be allowed to have smartphones. And then it's the opposition's job to argue the opposite point. So to sum it up, the motion is just the statement that lets everybody know which side of the argument each team is arguing for. Now I just come back to you guys for a second. Does everybody understand what we've spoken about so far? Does anybody have any questions? Anything you would like me to re-explain or anything?
No.
No.
Terrific. Fantastic. Let's keep on with it then. So, after looking at some examples of motion statements, we can move on to our next definition, which is the proposition. Now, the proposition is the team that supports the motion. So they might also be called the affirmative team. They present arguments in favor of the motion. So everything that the proposition says needs to agree with the motion of the debate. So the characteristics of the proposition are they advocate for the adoption or acceptance of the motion. So what that means is that the point of the debate is for both teams to try and convince the judges and the audience that their side of the debate is correct. So the proposition, they advocate, and that means they support, they speak in favor of, and they want you to adopt or accept the motion. Now that just means that they want you to adopt the motion means they want you to, I lost my train of thought for a moment there. So the adoption of the motion is they want you to take that belief on and they want you to believe that. And acceptance of the motion is just another way of saying that they want you to believe the motion is true. Now, on the other side of the debate, we have the opposition. The opposition is the team that opposes the motion. So they present arguments against it. So while everything that the propositions say has to make you agree with the motion of debate, everything that the opposition team says needs to convince you to reject the motion. So they want you to think that the motion is not correct. So the characteristics of the opposition are that they challenge the adoption or acceptance of the motion. So they want you to think that it's wrong and for you to believe what they say. Okay, so we'll come back to our slideshow in a little bit. So we have spoken about those four main terms now. Does anybody have any questions about any of those definitions?
No.
Great.
No.
Fantastic. Okay. So we'll come back to our slideshow now. Whoop. So our next topic of conversation is the interplay between the proposition and the opposition. So how do they interact? So the dynamics of the debate is that we have the two teams, the proposition and the opposition, and they have a clash of ideas. So each team is presenting ideas that go against the other team. So we've got a clash of ideas, arguments, and perspectives. So the ideas are the topic of each argument, the arguments themselves, which make up the speech that each debater presents, and we've got the perspectives, which basically means the point of view of each of the speakers. So because we all think differently, we've all got different brains, even though you're on the same team as somebody else, the both of you might think about the issue in a different way, and therefore you can both come up with very different ideas that are still on the same side of the debate. So that can make for some very interesting conversation. We need to make sure of the importance of balanced and well-constructed arguments from both sides. Excuse me. So the balanced part of that sentence just means that each team needs to get an equal amount of time to speak. We can't have one team speaking more than the other, because we need to use the time we've been given to make our arguments as convincing as possible. And if you need more time, then that really just means that you need to work on your arguments a bit more. And the arguments need to be well constructed. So that just means well thought out, well prepared, and well spoken. And the goal of the debate, or the goal of each team during the debate, is persuading the audience and influencing their stance on the motion. So we're looking to make the audience agree with us and think the same way about the motion that we do. And we want to influence them to decide to agree with us. Now, let's have, actually, before we do, any questions so far? I'm going to keep checking back in. Terrific. So the next thing we need to talk about is the interlocutor's role in mediating the debate. So when we talk about mediating the debate, we simply mean, how does the mediator make sure that the rules are followed and that everybody gets a fair chance? So some of the ways that the interlocutor mediates the debate is by ensuring equal speaking time for both teams. So like we were talking about before, we want to make sure that no one team gets more time to speak than the other. The interlocutor manages the flow of the debate, and they maintain order. So that comes down to once the speakers have had a chance to make their arguments, as soon as they're finished speaking, the interlocutor needs to make sure that the debate keeps rolling. The next person then gets their chance to speak. The next person gets their chance to speak. And maintaining order, again, just refers to making sure that all of the rules are being followed. And finally, it's the interlocutor's responsibility to resolve conflicts and enforce the debate rules. So if there are any arguments between debaters that are not to do with the debate, let's say a couple of debaters get a bit angry at each other, or they start arguing for real, it's the interlocutor's role to make sure that those disagreements come to an end and we get back on with the debate as it should be done. And of course, enforcing the rules just means that making sure the rules are followed. So that'll be all for now from our slides. We've just talked about a fair few topics there. So again, does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? Anything they'd like me to re-explain?
No.
Terrific.
No.
Good.
No.
Good. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the list of motions and debate topics, and we're going to have a look at what side of the argument might make which types of arguments. So let me just bring that up. Okay, so let's pick topic number 3. Should students be required to regularly visit museums? So the motion of this debate would be, this House believes that students should be required to regularly visit museums. So I'm going to create a whiteboard for that, and we're going to have a think of some arguments for that debate. So our topic is should students be required to regularly visit museums? And the motion is, this House believes that students should be required. To regularly visit museums. So I'm going to divide the whiteboard into two sections here. And on one side, we have the proposition. And on the other side, we have the opposition. So who wants to have a go at, well, first of all, we need to ask the question to work out which side is making which arguments. So somebody tell me which team states the motion. Is it the proposition, the affirmative team, or is it the opposition, the negative team? Tony, yes.
The affirmative team.
Very good. So I'm going to put a star next to the motion and a star next to proposition. Good. So this now helps us figure out what sorts of arguments each team should be making. So let's have a think now. What could be some possible arguments for students to regularly visit museums? So I want us to try and think of 3 arguments for each team. So what are some possible reasons or arguments in favor of regularly visiting a museum? You can put them in the chat box. You can put your hand up to speak. So first of all, I'll come up with the first argument. Museums are a great place to learn lots of new information. So museums are a great place to learn lots of new information. What are some other possible arguments that we could make? Good. So team 1 is the proposition, good. But what are some of the arguments that we could make in favor of going to museums as part of a school trip? I've already given you one.
I have
Pardon? Good. So we can learn about history now. What might be different? I'll give you guys a little clue. What might be different? Excuse me. What might be different about learning something at a museum than learning in a classroom?
That
What's one
learning in a
difference?
museum, we can remember it's long for a long time, but when we learn in the classroom, we will forget it.
Okay, that's a good point. Why is that though? Why is that?
Because when
Is
we
this
go to the museum, this is interesting and it's fun, so we can remember it. So, but when in a class, it is so boring. The teacher just say and say, we don't have any pictures, so we can forget it.
okay? So we could say that it is more. What would be the word we could use for that? So learning in a museum is more immersive, let's say. So learning in a museum is more immersive and hands-on. So what that means is that immersive, you're surrounded by the topic that you're learning about. So if you were learning about, say, let's say the history of America and how it was founded, and you went to the museum, you'd be surrounded by lots of dummies wearing all of the outfits. The room might be.
we can buy the books, and we will study history.
Good. You can buy books on the topic at the museum. They often have gift shops. Very good. So we've got our three arguments here for the proposition. Now let's have a look at some possible arguments for the opposition. What are some arguments that we could make on the other side of the argument? So students should not be required to attend a museum. So I'll come up with the first one.
Parents don't have time to bring children to the museum.
But the topic that we're talking about is students should be required to visit museums through the school. So all of that would be arranged by the school. It would be the school's responsibility to get the students to the museum and to get them back to the school. So I would say the first argument, because remember we're talking about students, so we're talking about school. So I would say the cost, it might be too expensive. Very good. Good. So what is another argument that we could make? Correct. Parents would need to pay more money. Minicat Zon, do you have an argument for the opposition?
If we go to the museum, we will need a lot of time.
Good. Very good. Very good. It takes a long time to go on a
If the school
field.
is far from the museum,
So that would be counted into the second argument, because if the school is far away from the museum, it would take a long time to go to the museum. So that's covered by the second argument, but good try. Who can think of a third possible argument? So we've got two great arguments so far. Tony. Sorry, I think I just accidentally muted you then. What were you saying, Tony?
Some display object will be damaged by the clumsy students.
So there could be a, let me write that in. So there could be a risk of students breaking something. So to make that argument, we would have to, we would have to be willing to argue that the students are very, very clumsy all the time. And there would have to be a high risk of, there'd have to be a high risk of us actually breaking something if we were to go to the museum. So is that your experience of the students you go to school with, that they're all very clumsy and they break a lot of things?
if we break a lot of things, we will have to pay a lot of money.
You would. You would. Well, depending on the circumstances, the university, the museum might have insurance. So depending on the situation. But Tony, the students that you go to school with, are they regularly very clumsy and do they break a lot of things?
Not really.
Okay, so if that's not your personal experience, then we might have to cross that argument off. Because if there's not a high risk of it happening, it's not really an argument that we could make. So could anyone think of another argument for the opposition for this debate? All right, I've got one. I'll write it in here. So subject relevance. So what that means is that the museums can have a lot of different exhibits on at any one time, but those exhibits might not have anything to do with what we're currently learning at school. So if they have an exhibit on, for example, the founding of America, let's just use that example again. So if they're having an exhibit on the history of America, but we're learning about Vietnamese history at the time, then it wouldn't make much sense to go to the museum if that subject wasn't being taught at the museum. So that's something to consider as well. But very well done, everybody. We came up with some fantastic examples of arguments, and it shows me that you all really do understand about the two sides of the debate and how the motion affects the arguments that each team would make. So very well done, guys. That was fantastic. Save that. So well done, everybody. It was good to see you all having a think, coming up with some ideas. Now, let's go back to our slideshow. And let's recap. So, who can tell me what the interlocutor does, or who the interlocutor is? Yes, Tony.
I remember interlocutor is the person who moderates the debate.
Very good. Can you tell me a little bit more, like what does the interlocutor make sure happens during the debate?
The interlocutor makes sure the debate is fair.
Very good. The interlocutor makes sure that the debate is fair and that all the rules are followed. Well done. So, our next word, somebody else, please. Who can tell me what the motion is? Who can tell me what the motion of the debate is? Yes, Lily.
The motion of the debate is the statement or topic that is being debated.
Very good. Very good. So the motion is the statement of the topic that is being debated. And just to quickly recap, who can tell me which team makes the motion? Which team makes the motion? Tim, do you have the answer?
Yes, it's a proposition.
Very good, Tim. The proposition makes the motion. Now, speaking of the proposition, can anybody tell me what the proposition is?
Proposition that we agree with the topic.
Very good. The proposition is the team that agrees with the topic. And finally, what is the opposition? Let's have somebody else answer this question. Somebody that hasn't answered yet today. So if the proposition agrees with the motion, what is the opposition? I see Lily's got the answer, but she's already answered a few questions today. I want to give somebody else the chance to answer a question. Elsa, do you know what the opposition is?
No.
All right, let me give you a clue. If the proposition agrees with the motion, then what does the opposition do? The proposition agrees, so the opposition does what? What's the opposite of agree?
It's not agree.
Correct. Thank you, Mini Catzon. So the opposition disagrees with the motion. Now, a little bit of a question for you guys to think about as we talk about the structure of a debate. How are all of these roles interconnected? Or in other words, how do all of these roles relate to one another? So I'm going to bring up the whiteboard. So we have the interlocutor. We have the motion. We have the proposition. And we have the opposition. So how are all of these words, or how are all of these roles of a debate, how are they related to each other? So I'll give you the first one. The proposition and the opposition are related to each other because they compete with each other. So we've got our first relationship there. The proposition and the opposition compete with each other. Now, what are they competing about? Who can answer that question? What are the proposition and the opposition competing about? Come on, we literally just talked about this. What are the proposition and the opposition competing about? Put it in the chat box or jump on the microphone and give me the answer, but somebody give me the answer. We talked about this about 5 minutes ago. I've got a message here. Good, very good. The proposition and the opposition argue about the motion. And now, what about the interlocutor? Very good, everybody. We got our last question correct, the motion. But what about the interlocutor? How do they come into play with all of this? So this answer might be the trickiest one because there are two different answers. The interlocutor does something with the motion and it does something with both of the teams. So first of all, what does the interlocutor have to do with the motion or with the debate? What does the interlocutor have to do with the debate? Who knows that one? The interlocutor keeps the debate fair. So the interlocutor keeps the debate fair. And finally, how does the interlocutor keep the debate fair? We've got one more relationship to describe, and that is the relationship with both teams. What does the interlocutor do? What is their job? Come on, I've already answered 2 of these questions for you. I want you guys to get this last one. What does the interlocutor do to keep the debate? Good. No, that was the answer for the last question. The interlocutor keeps the debate fair. But now we're asking, how does the interlocutor keep the debate fair? How does the interlocutor keep the debate fair? Come on, somebody toss me out a few answers, please. I know one of you knows this. In fact, I think most of you know this, if not all of you. So someone give me an answer. How does the interlocutor keep the debate fair?
Make sure to follow the rules.
Perfect. Well done. Makes sure rules are followed. Same here. Makes sure rules are followed. Fantastic, guys. Well done. So as you can see, these four different parts of the debate are probably 4 of the most important parts of the debate. So well done on being able to tell me their relationships to one another. Well done, everybody. So the next thing I would like to talk to you about is the importance of understanding these roles. So it's important to understand what each of these terms, what part each of them play in a debate, because effective participation in a debate requires knowledge of these terms. Because if you know exactly what the motion is, you know what the topic that you are debating is. And that's probably the most important thing, to understand what you're debating about. If you understand what each of the team names mean, you understand which side of the argument that you are on based on which team you are on. And finally, if you understand who the interlocutor is and what they do, then you are able to you're able to debate much more effectively, because if you don't understand a rule, you know to ask the interlocutor to explain the rule to you. If you want to challenge part of an argument of the other team, or if you need any clarification, or if there's a dispute that you need resolving, you know to ask the interlocutor for help with that. So if you understand what all of these terms mean, it's going to make your debating experience 100 times more fun and 100 times
Teacher,
more
I have a
easy.
question.
So, yes, absolutely. Give me 2 seconds. I'm back. What's your question?
Is debating important?
So it can be, yes. So debating itself is not the be all and end all. However, it can teach you a lot of very valuable skills. So the critical thinking skills that you learn, for example, or how to think about a problem to find a solution, that can be a very handy skill for you to have throughout your whole life. So by participating in debate, you learn lots and lots and lots of very valuable skills. So what debating can give you is very important, is my answer.
So,
Good question, Lily.
teacher, it's debating like in Ukraine and Russia warrior like Ukraine and Russia war. They're debating each other about Ukraine.
Well, the war has gone a little bit further than a debate right now. But to be honest, I don't know enough about the situation to be able to comment on it, and I don't want to give you guys any wrong information. But I would say that that situation has gone far beyond a debate right now, because I think they're actively at war with each other. But those were some good questions, Lily. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, the next question we need to ask are, what are the next steps to take? So first of all, we want to practice identifying and analyzing motions, the proposition, and the opposition in debate. So I want you guys to maybe watch some debating videos on the internet and really get to understand what the motion is all about, understand the proposition side of the argument and the opposition side of the argument. I want you to explore different debate scenarios and motions to strengthen your understanding. So there are multiple types of debates. There are academic debates that take place at schools. There are competition debates where you actually compete against other teams to win tournaments. And there are also public debates, which is like debates that happen around politics and public issues. So I want you to try and watch as many different types of debates as you can find and look out for the motions, the proposition side and the opposition side, and just really try and get a good understanding of it all. Now, the subject of our next two lessons, our next lesson on Thursday is going to be a big revision session because we've learned a lot of new vocabulary.
Is that, teacher, is that a test?
No, it's not a test. It's just a chance for, it's a chance for us to fill in any gaps that you may have. So if you don't remember something or you don't understand something, you're going to get all the chance you need to ask me any questions about it. So we're going to end that lesson, hopefully with everybody understanding what we've talked about over the last 3 lessons. And finally, let's wrap it up. So the 2 things that I want you to take away from today are, remember that it's important to understand these terms to make your debating experience easier to navigate. So that goes back to what I said a couple of minutes ago, that if you know what the interlocutor does and the things that you are allowed to ask him to help you with, I say him, but it could be a her as well. but if you know what you're allowed to ask the interlocutor, then you can, like, it will make your debate journey a lot easier, because you can have rules clarified, you can have the motion clarified. They're there to help you with any disputes you're having. So there are lots of things that the interlocutor can do for you. And of course, understand the motion and understand the proposition and opposition teams. So by understanding all of these terms, it's going to make your debating 100 times easier. So really study those. I'm going to check to see if you guys need any handouts in the Zalo group. And finally, I want you guys to watch some debating videos on the internet and further develop your understanding of all of these terms.
Yes.
So we talked about a lot of stuff today, guys, so you did fantastic. So Ben's class, I thank you very much for your attention today. And your homework will be just to watch some videos on the internet about debating and learn to understand. And your homework is only debating videos. Make sure you understand your those roles. So that,
Teacher, do we have to write some debate in the paper and send it to you?
yes, so the homework that you had over the last couple of lessons is, yeah, so I think after our last lesson, I wanted you to write a few sentences about each of your arguments, just to expand them slightly. So get that done as well. Make sure that's done before next lesson. And watch some debating videos to understand those key terms that we talked about today. So well done, everybody. That's the end of class. I'll see you all on Thursday.
Okay. Goodbye.
Goodbye,
Bye,
teacher.
teacher.
Goodbye, teacher.
Teacher.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, teachers.
Great job tonight.